An all-party committee of parliamentarians is calling on the federal government to create a comprehensive strategy to combat foreign interference. The National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians was given unprecedented access to Canada's intelligence agencies, and it found that foreign interference is a significant and growing risk in this country, but Canada's ability to deal with it is limited by a lack of coordinated approaches to dealing with the problem. Liberal MP David McGuinty is the chair of the committee, and he's with me now. Mr. McGuinty, good to see you.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming to speak with me. Your report concludes that there is ample evidence that Canada is the target of significant and sustained foreign interference activities from China and Russia and other states. Let's start there. Which other states? I mean, people hear a lot about China and Russia. Who else are we talking about?
I'm going to disappoint you because I'm not in a position to tell you which other states. Canadians should know that our reports go into the Prime Minister in an unredacted form, Peter, and then it goes through a redaction process. And different information is removed for different reasons, but it is almost entirely related to the level of classified information behind those conclusions.
Okay, so elaborate on that if you can. I know you can maybe not elaborate, but give me so Canadians will wonder. Okay, what does that mean? Are there trade considerations? What goes into the Prime Minister unredacted, comes out redacted? What's the concern?
Well, the concern is obviously we interface with the security and intelligence community. We have access. Not quite unfettered access, but a lot of access to a lot of classified information. So we've got to be very careful about what is made public, what is not made public. Our act that creates us sets out the screen, so to speak, the four different things that we can have information redacted about. So what you have in this report is an unredacted version where we try to still communicate to Canadians, in this case, on two fronts, the threat of foreign interference, and the government's response to that foreign interference. This is the first time ever that a body is able to access the information and assess the government's overall response.
Okay, I want to come to that response, but I think it's important. Let's lay a little groundwork so Canadians understand. Okay, you want to know what response is required when you get a feeling for how significant the issue is. So, okay, let's deal with China and Russia, and presumably the others, I'm guessing, operate in a lot of the same ways. So who are they targeting and how do they do it?
So the report is really clear. On the half of the review is a clear description of what this threat looks like. What are different foreign actors doing? So what are they doing when it comes, for example, to ethno-cultural communities in Canada? These are often, we found in the report, targeted communities. Folks who are the subject of external efforts to try and manipulate what they're doing, what they're saying. It may involve, for example, pressure on their families back in another country. So the ethnocultural targeting of Canadian citizens happens, and it's happening today. Similarly, there are efforts on university and college campuses to have a bearing on the kind of debate that takes place, the way in which a foreign state is portrayed.
So tell me more. What's the objective?
The objective is ultimately the survival of that foreign interfering state actor. It's about trying to, in some cases, maintain power, authority, brand, global brand. Sometimes it's about, as we saw in the case of Russia with respect to the American election, a lot of the American information, which is also part and parcel of this report, indicates that it was very much about undermining democracy and undermining liberal democratic traditions. So there are different reasons motivating foreign interfering state actors, but it's a question of breaking it down as we have in the report. I mentioned academia, the media is another area, a target area, traditional media and foreign language media. We're seeing the rise of different cultural groups on campuses. School boards are being approached by certain countries to be able to influence the way in which a country is seen.
Okay. Any evidence that elected officials are being targeted?
We do talk about the whole question of electoral integrity, but this report didn't focus on electoral interference per se, nor cyber interference per se, because there are other groups doing fabulous work in this regard. We do explain what's happening on both those fronts, but That's just not a question I can answer
Okay,
right now.
so tell me then, okay, now we have a better idea of the threat. And what your report concludes is that all of our security agencies are going at it in kind of different ways, and there's sort of no, if I'm reading it correctly, sort of no overarching coordinated response to deal with these threats. Have I got it right?
You've got it right. We're saying that there are different initiatives happening across the federal family. We've looked at all the different actors. What are they doing? And we pointed out a couple of areas where we need to make progress. We need to make progress inside our federal government. We need to make progress interdepartmentally. We need to make progress when it comes to our federal government working with other orders of government, like the province and cities. Here's an example. If CSIS is of the view that it would like to share information with a local police force, in Toronto, for example, on a particular threat landscape, it can't do that because the police on the front lines don't have the necessary security clearance.
Right.
So they can't share the information that's important. We lay out these kinds of impediments.
So let me stop you there for a second. So what would happen in that case of that threat then? If they're unable to communicate to the local police force, this might be happening.
Obviously, an unclassified briefing could take place. This is the kind of activity that does take place from time to time. But what we really tried to paint here is where are the key stumbling blocks to improvement so we can actually, as a country, respond better to this reality, this significant and sustained foreign interference activities.
Were you surprised to find what you found? I mean, the threats coming from China and Russia, that's not exactly new. You'd think by now we would have a well-oiled machine of coordinated security agencies in this country that know exactly what to do and how.
Peter, I think the committee believes that the situation is capable of improvement. It always is, but now in particular we've identified where improvement can take place. And one of the models we pointed to is Australia. Australia only recently created a whole new counter-interference strategy, and it's created a new national counter-foreign interference coordinator and a task force. And just in December of 2019, Peter, they funded it to the tune of 90 million Canadian dollars for a single task force just to deal with foreign interference. So we think that's a model worth examining in greater detail, but we definitely need more centralization and we need more coordination.
A couple of other issues I want to deal with in the time we have left. You also found failings in both efforts, in efforts to both increase diversity in security agencies and on the inclusion front. What did you find?
We found that there are approaches being taken to diversity and inclusion which just don't seem to be working. The community is divided into different organizations, so measuring and evaluating what's happening between them is difficult. Those metrics aren't in place. Second, we found that so much of this is relegated to the Human Resources Department. Just get HR to look after this. We now know that we need senior management to be engaged. Why do we do this? Because we know from studies in Canada, from the performance of security and intelligence organizations around the world, the CIA has written about this, Harvard Business School has written about this, Australia, etc., CSIS. We know there's a connection between working to improve the performance of these organizations and diversity and inclusion. And of course, most Canadians right now remember either the RCMP or they remember DND and these lawsuits that have taken place and the settlements and the class action lawsuits. That's set us back a little bit. But the reality is we need to up our game when it comes to getting the best talent that we've got in Canada to help us.
Let's talk about, you mentioned DND. You did a special report on the collection of information on Canadians by the Defence Department. You found that DND activities may not be in compliance with the Privacy Act. How so? Because
DND tells us they're not sure if they're bound by the Privacy Act. And we say, okay, we need to hear more about this. But one of the tripwires in our legislation that creates us, Peter, is when we come across anything that indicates that an organization in the security and intelligence field may not be in compliance with the law, we have a statutory obligation. We have to send this directly to the Attorney General.
Now, to be clear, is this the collection of evidence in Canada, or is this a collection of evidence overseas?
Overseas.
Okay.
Overseas.
But still, what's the argument? Is that, okay, because it's overseas, we're not subject to the Act?
Well, again,
we're not subject to the Act at all?
Well, the report lays it out pretty nicely for Canadians to understand. we're hopeful. Again, we don't tell the Attorney General what to do, but we sent this matter to him for his attention, and I'm sure he'll take the appropriate legal steps.
All right, David McGuinty, good to have you come in and speak about this.
Thank you so much.
Good to see you again.
Appreciate
Take care.
it.